Not only did you kill her like a coward, you shot her in the back of the head, you dragged her body out of sight like she was trash.
And even though I'm exploding on the inside, I am going to try to be as calm and measured as I can for my father's.
Appropriate sentence is the maximum sentence, which you will receive right now.
Izam Hamilton, convicted of murdering retired University of Michigan professor Robert Sharp during a home invasion, will remain in prison. The Michigan Court of Appeals upheld Hamilton's conviction for the 2018 slaying, which took place on June 11th at Sharp's home on Alpine Drive in Ann Arbor. Hamilton, 32, was found guilty of felony murder, armed robbery, first-degree arson, and mutilation of a body. After killing Sharp, Hamilton dragged the professor's body to the basement and set it on fire.
And even though I'm exploding on the inside, I am going to try to be as calm and measured as I can for my father's. I wondered if he was haunted by the horror in my father's eyes as he lay dying.
All I'm guilty of is possession of stolen property.
That actually happened a couple of times as he was being led away. Outside court afterward, David Sharp told us he was not
finding a little bit to it. And so I would, in my opinion,
Izam Hamilton was found guilty of murdering retired University of Michigan professor Robert Sharp and was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole following a bench trial before Washtenaw County Judge Darlene O'Brien. Sharp, a professor emeritus of chemistry, was discovered fatally stabbed and severely burned under a pile of charred possessions in his home on Alpine Drive. The prosecution, led by then-assistant prosecutor John Vella, used substantial circumstantial evidence collected by the Ann Arbor Police Department to prove that Hamilton had a plan to rob Sharp and ultimately murdered him when he found him at home. Hamilton argued on appeal that the trial court made errors by not allowing his attorneys to withdraw before the trial, and by admitting testimony about a 2012 home invasion conviction. He also contended that the evidence against him was insufficient for conviction. The appellate court found that the trial court was indeed wrong to allow testimony about the prior home invasion, but deemed this error harmless, as it had little impact on the overall facts of the case. Ultimately, despite his arguments, Hamilton will spend the rest of his life in prison. In the early hours of November 2010, a brutal attack took the life of Paul Skinner at his home in Yale, Michigan. Amid the confusion, the police quickly turned their attention to his adopted daughter, Tia Skinner, suspecting her involvement. Paul Earl Skinner, born in December 1962, was a lifelong Michigan resident. He married Mara Boria in April 1986, and they had been together for over 20 years by the time of the incident. Paul, who had been a pipe fitter for about 10 years, was also an active member of his local community and church. He had 3 biological children with Mara and adopted Tia, who lived with them at Yale. On the night of November 12, 2010, Paul and Mara were awakened by 2 masked men who attacked them with knives. Despite their assault, Paul managed to drive the attackers away from their home.
I never wanted my parents. Death is so final. I wanted my parents to be able to live their lives. I wish I could go back to before I got involved with this guy. I wish I would have listened to what my parents said about him.
Tia, you completely puzzled me. I thought I knew you. I thought we shared the same feeling. I, along with my family and friends, will forever bear a heart-crushing loss. But because Paul, we will be okay. We will continue to love life, share joy.
Mara eventually managed to call 911, and when authorities arrived, they found Paul had been stabbed 23 times, leading to his death. Mara, who had been stabbed 26 times, survived the attack against all odds. At the time, their son Jeffrey was visiting and was in the basement watching a movie with Tia, their 17-year-old adopted daughter. The attackers entered the home while Jeffrey and Tia were downstairs. Mara was woken by Paul's cries for help and realized they were under attack. Jeffrey heard noises from upstairs and saw Tia going up to check. She returned, saying something was wrong. Jeffrey then saw blood on the walls and noticed his father, who was disoriented and covered in blood, trying to get back into the house. Despite Jeffrey's attempts to help his father, it was too late. During the chaos, Tia remained in the basement. When Jeffrey asked her to come upstairs to help their mother, she repeatedly said, "I can't come up there. I can't. I can't." When the police arrived, they were surprised by Tia's calm demeanor. She talked about her school and future college plans rather than asking about her parents. Further investigation revealed that Tia and her parents had recently argued over her relationship with an 18-year-old named Jonathan Kurtz, whom Paul and Mara disapproved of. They had forbidden Tia from seeing Jonathan and had taken her phone after finding a message from him professing his love. It appeared that Tia's anger toward her parents may have led to the attack. The police discovered that Jonathan and his friend, James Preston, were involved in the plot. The trio had met at a youth church group to plan the attack. They were paid $500 and had a checklist of things to do before carrying out the crime. The evidence was overwhelming, and all three were convicted of first-degree murder, attempted murder, and conspiracy. In September 2011, Tia, Jonathan, and James were each sentenced to life in prison without parole.
As most teenagers would, I said something to a guy. He took what I said literally and carried out the act. Unfortunately, none of those wishes will ever come true, but I know that my family is closer and stronger since all of this. And most importantly, I wish I could have my family back. Unfortunately, none of those wishes will ever come true.
Feelings, values, loves, and life. But I guess I never really knew you at all. Heart-crushing loss. But because Paul was who he was, we will be okay.
A judge has sentenced Scott Roeder, a fervent anti-abortion activist, to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 50 years. Roeder, 52, was convicted of murdering Dr. George Tiller, a well-known abortion provider, in May 2009 at Tiller's Church in Wichita. Sedgwick County District Judge Warren Wilbert chose the harsher sentence, citing evidence that Roeder had stalked Tiller before the killing. While Roeder could have been eligible for parole after either 25 or 50 years, the judge opted for the longer term due to the premeditated nature of the crime.
To each other, so that your total term of incarceration will be life with parole eligibility and a good time credit of up to 15% for time served on counts 2 and 3, the scorable age of 102 years and beyond. Under the law, I will assess the sentence handed down by this court, and you have right to transcripts of these proceedings.
Before his sentencing, Scott Roeder took the stand and claimed he killed Dr. Tiller to protect unborn children, asserting that his actions were justified. He accused the judge of unfairness and argued that his trial was a miscarriage of justice because he was not allowed to present arguments about the moral issues surrounding abortion. Roeder suggested that the death of a few abortion providers like Tiller should be considered in light of the millions of abortions performed. During the hearing, Roeder repeatedly disrupted the proceedings. At one point, he interrupted a prosecutor who was questioning a psychologist from Topeka, shouting that he killed Tiller to safeguard unborn babies. The judge warned Roeder that further interruptions would result in his removal from the courtroom. Lee Thompson, an attorney for Tiller's family, urged Judge Wilbert to impose the maximum sentence, arguing that anything less could encourage other anti-abortion extremists to commit similar acts.
As the years went on, there was a Summer of Mercy in 1991 where thousands of people came.
Specifically, what was it that made George Tiller come to your attention?
He was one of the legislation brought forth.
I'm talking about individuals, protesters, things like that.
I believe, yes, in 1986 it was bombed, although through the years there had been many. I remember specifically the cessation of what was going on there.
We, the jury, find the defendant, Scott Roeder, guilty of the crime of aggravated assault of Keith Marr, crime of first-degree murder. On count 2, we, the jury, find
matter for a pre-sentence investigation pursuant to statute, and the sentencing in this matter will be scheduled. Let the media coordinator know when you all can return for the post-trial interviews.
A disturbed serial killer, Cameron Wilson, was sentenced to 71 years in prison after being convicted of 13 charges, including 5 murders, 1 sexual assault, and 3 attempted murders. During his court hearing, Wilson shockingly clapped as he was sentenced and audibly declared, "At least I'm still alive," showing a disturbing lack of remorse. Among his victims were Lita Moore and Stacy Lieberman, who were brutally assaulted, stoned, and then set on fire.
That the judge, he's been described as a serial killer, a psychopath, with a limited chances of...
Yeah! Lord, give him life for every life he took.
Rehabilitation. The crimes he committed were very, very, very gruesome.
Wilson was sentenced to 4 life terms for the murders of Toyer Stover, Stacy Lieberman, Liquida Moore, and the assault of Donnie Davids. Additionally, he received 15 years for the murder of Alfonso Van Ruin, 5 years for possession of an unlicensed firearm and ammunition, 15 years for the murder of Ernest Erasmus, 10 years for attempted murder and conspiracy, 6 years for an attack with intent to cause grievous bodily harm, and 10 years for the murder of Rosalind Lake. As the life sentences were read out, Wilson laughed and rolled his eyes, showing blatant disregard for the gravity of his crimes. In response, enraged members of his victims' families shouted, "You will rot in hell," from the public gallery.
4 life sentences and a further 71 years in prison for various crimes that he committed.
Other acts of violence. Wilson was arrested for the murder of teenager Liquida Moore in September last year.
That's the last time. You think nothing about women.
He's a psychopath, he's a serial.
In 2022, Justin McGriff was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole for the murder of Thomas Dunn, a 46-year-old bus driver, father, and military veteran. Earlier that year, McGriff was convicted of first-degree murder after the jury deliberated for 5 hours. Prosecutors revealed that McGriff had said, "God bless you" to Dunn twice before slitting his throat. During the trial, McGriff's defense admitted to the attack, but argued that he was insane and unaware of his actions, citing expert testimony of possible schizophrenia. While acknowledging McGriff's mental illness, prosecutors argued that he was aware of his actions and intended to kill Dunn. They also reminded the court that a judge had previously deemed McGriff competent to stand trial.
Sentenced to life in prison. While he did not speak out in court, the judge had plenty to say, and in the meantime, Michael Dunn also wanting to thank the state attorney's office as well.
Truly reveal itself in isolation.
The state argued that McGriff clearly knew what he was doing on the day of the murder. They pointed out that he concealed the knife and, while fleeing from police, changed his appearance to avoid capture. To prevent similar incidents in the future, Hart upgraded its surveillance camera systems and increased security with armed guards at transit stations. Additionally, transit drivers underwent de-escalation training with Hillsborough County deputies. A 27-year-old man has been sentenced to 40 years in prison for terrorizing a neighborhood over several weeks. Prosecutors revealed that in 2018, Cornelius Payne committed a series of home invasions and other crimes, including the brutal beating and death of a 94-year-old woman. Now, nearly 3 years after their lives were turned upside down, a family in Cleveland is finally finding some closure.
Our family in ways we cannot measure. But today, hopefully, justice will follow him.
On Thursday, a Cuyahoga County judge sentenced 27-year-old Cornelius Payne to 40 years in prison for a series of violent crimes in Slavic Village. According to prosecutors, on September 17th of that year, he broke into a home and brutally assaulted 94-year-old Garcia and her 74-year-old daughter, who had both traveled from Honduras to visit family. Payne stole several items, including a cell phone, iPad, jewelry, and cash, before fleeing the scene.
I tell you wholeheartedly that if Mr. Payne would have been hungry, we would have fed him. He would have needed anything. We would have gladly given it.
Garcia did not survive the attack, but her 74-year-old daughter did. While giving their impact statements in court, the daughter revealed that she is still grappling with the trauma of the incident.
Hurt my mother's soul in a way that I don't think she will ever fully recover.
Payne has a long criminal history and was on parole when prosecutors say he committed this crime and 2 others. Just days before killing Garcia, he assaulted a girl in a home on the same street. Then, on October 1st, he broke into an apartment in broad daylight and attacked a developmentally disabled girl. In court, a representative read a letter from the mother of that girl.
This incident changed our entire lives in many ways, especially hers because she has had something stolen from her that she will never get back. her innocence.
Payne briefly addressed the families, including some members of the Garcia family who appeared virtually from Honduras.
I'd like to apologize for my actions. Take responsibility. I'm sorry to the people family.
But for these families, it's too little, too late. Now, with Payne's fate sealed, they are hoping for healing.
Grandmother is now in heaven, and my mother will survive this because she's surrounded.
A mother of 4 was tragically murdered, and the man responsible for her death was sentenced. In a heartbreaking moment, one of her children spoke out in court. John Jordan III, the man who committed the crime, wanted to see something on his girlfriend's phone. When she refused, they fought over it, and what happened next was shocking. Judge Gall described the act as absolutely unthinkable.
I'd like to express the amount of pain and so much stuff that I have went through because of this. This took a great toll on my mental health.
That's the voice of a girl whose mother was brutally murdered.
That's the time where I would definitely need her support, her advice, her wisdom, and everything that she could possibly give me, because this is the most important stage in a child's life.
At 37, John Jordan III is now facing the consequences for taking his girlfriend's life.
There are no words to describe your thoughtless viciousness. None. None. You shot this woman in the back of the head. And what was the argument over? The argument that you started was over the cell phone.
Shanika Clark was stabbed to death on October 12, 2021.
Not only did you kill her like a coward, you shot her in the back of the head, you dragged her body out of sight like she was trash.
Jordan told the children, who were at home, that the shot had come from down the street and that he was going out to get them pizza. He never returned. When they went outside, they found their mother's lifeless body on the ground. Clark, the mother of 4, was dedicated to her children, and her family says her life revolved around them.
I mean, my daughter's mother gone. I have to sit there and write letters and put letters on balloons so we can send them to her mama.
Judge John Gall delivered a stern message to Jordan.
The appropriate sentence is the maximum sentence, which you will receive right now.
Jordan received a sentence of 9 years and 6 months for his crime, with the possibility of parole after 36 years. The judge also added another 10 years to the sentence, stating it was to ensure public safety. Joanna Dennehy embarked on a tumultuous journey that led her to a life of crime and violence. She left home with her boyfriend, John Trenner. Her turbulent upbringing drove her towards drinking, drug use, and self-harm. Her life took a dramatic turn when she became pregnant, and her relationship with Trenner deteriorated, especially when she became pregnant again in 2005. Trenner left with their children, and Joanna sought a fresh start by moving to Peterborough, where she met Gary Stretch Richards. Despite her issues, Richards fell deeply in love with her. In February 2012, after being arrested for theft, Joanna's antisocial behavior and obsessive-compulsive disorder were uncovered, revealing the complexities of her psyche. Amid her struggles, Joanna began a chilling 10-day killing spree, starting with Lucas Slabodusky. Over this period, she murdered her housemate, John Chapman, and her landlord, Kevin Lee. Her twisted pleasure in these acts reflected her desire to emulate the infamous Bonnie and Clyde, envisioning herself as a modern counterpart. Her goal was to kill 9 men, but her plans were spoiled, and she was apprehended shortly after the discovery of her first victim. In court, Joanna shocked everyone by pleading guilty to all charges. The judge, recognizing the severity of her crimes and the threat she posed, sentenced her to life imprisonment without the possibility of release. Joanna maintained a smug and defiant demeanor throughout the proceedings, her smirks and laughter a chilling reminder of her dark nature. Even while serving her life sentence, she continued to form connections with other prisoners, revealing her unending appetite for both bloodshed and affection. Joanna Dennehy now spends her life behind bars, cut off from the outside world. Casey White's prison escape occurred on April 29, 2022, while he was awaiting trial for a capital murder case. White escaped from the Lauderdale County Jail in Florence, Alabama. On the morning of April 29th at 9:30 a.m., Vicki White, the assistant director at the Lauderdale County Jail, escorted Casey White to a police vehicle and left the detention center. Surveillance footage showed Casey in handcuffs and leg shackles. Casey, who has an extensive criminal history, was already serving 75 years for a 2015 crime spree. He was at the facility for pre-trial motions after confessing 2 years earlier to the 2015 fatal stabbing of 59-year-old Connie Ridgway. Vicky told fellow officers she was taking Casey to the county courthouse in Florence for a psychological evaluation and then going to see her personal physician as she was not feeling well. This task aroused suspicion, since inmates being taken to the courthouse are supposed to be escorted by 2 deputies. Authorities believe Vicky was not challenged due to her position.
Now talking to police, Alex Perez has the latest.
Casey, did you kill Vicky White? 2 weeks, the story was absolutely insane. I wrote him a letter, but I never expected that Casey White would call.
Those of us who work with Vicky White and have worked with her for years, this is not the Vicky.
See the motions that we filed in this case. We were prepared out-of-date law. It is still on the books, but I disagree with it.
For Casey White, he is still facing capital murder charges on a separate case for the 2015 death.
A few hours later, Casey White was in court pleading guilty and apologizing. He told the court next to Casey White. Prosecutors say they want to try him for Vicky White's death.
The 2 never returned to the detention center. The Lauderdale County Sheriff's Department received surveillance footage from a local gas station showing White's patrol car just 8 minutes after they left the detention center. Deputies checked the courthouse schedule and found no hearings or evaluations that day. Authorities initially feared Vicky might have been coerced into helping Casey escape, prompting a statewide manhunt to find her safely and recapture Casey. When they were not found, the search expanded nationwide. Authorities offered rewards for information leading to their capture and considered them armed and dangerous. Casey White was deemed so violent that law enforcement personnel were advised to approach him with caution. On May 9, 2022, authorities in Evansville, Indiana, received surveillance footage of the couple washing a pickup truck provided by a car wash employee. They were later seen in another video getting into a gray Cadillac DTS. An Evansville police officer spotted the vehicle at a motel and called for backup. The couple left the motel and got into the car, with Casey driving. A chase ensued on US 41, and Casey drove onto a grassy field. A police vehicle rammed the Cadillac, causing it to flip into a ditch. As law enforcement converged on the vehicle, Casey White surrendered without incident, but Vicky was found with a gunshot wound to the head. She was rushed to a local hospital and pronounced dead hours later, with her wound ruled self-inflicted. Casey White was captured and went to trial. In May 2023, he reached a plea deal, pleading guilty to first-degree prison escape in exchange for not being tried for felony murder in Vicky White's death. He was sentenced to life in prison. Arthur Richard Marple, a Republican who represented Hooksett in the New Hampshire House of Representatives, was born on March 4, 1931, and passed away on December 13, 2019. Known also as Richard Marple or Dick Marple, he completed 6 terms in the House before his death. In January 2020, Democrat Kathleen Martins was elected to fill his seat. Marple made several attempts to pass legislation supporting the sovereign citizen movement's views and to enforce its legal claims. In 2015, after being pulled over, he was charged with driving with a revoked license in 2016. During his court case, Marple presented numerous sovereign citizen arguments to Judge Kristen Spath, claiming he was under threat and coercion and that the court had no jurisdiction over him. He argued that driver's licenses were unnecessary because motor vehicles were consumer goods and insisted on having his license returned, labeling the judge's refusal as criminal conversion. Marple also demanded that Judge Spath recuse herself from the case. After a disruptive outburst from Marple, Judge Spath left the courtroom. Marple was ultimately found responsible for the offense and was fined $310. The confirmation hearing of Brett Kavanaugh for a position on the U.S. Supreme Court in 2018 became one of the most emotionally charged and contentious moments in history. Kavanaugh faced allegations of sexual assault from Dr. Christine Blasey Ford, a professor at Palo Alto University. Ford's heartfelt testimony about her experiences resonated deeply, evoking compassion and solidarity from many observers. However, Kavanaugh's impassioned response truly captured attention and became a defining moment. His emotional and tearful denial of the accusations was filled with anger and resentment. He vehemently denounced the proceedings as a politically motivated attack, turning the hearing into a highly charged and dramatic spectacle. This raw display of emotion was a departure from the typically composed demeanor expected from a prospective Supreme Court justice. Kavanaugh's combative stance, visible frustration, and emotional rebuttal were captured on camera, creating intense and unforgettable courtroom footage. In August 2019, an Indiana courtroom became the unexpected venue for a wedding, marking a poignant departure from its usual proceedings. Crystal Sells, a defendant facing neglect and abuse charges, made an unusual request to marry her fiancé, Thomas Martin, before her sentencing. Judge Mark Dudley agreed to officiate the ceremony, creating one of the most surreal moments in recent courtroom history. Decked out in prison stripes, Sells and Martin exchanged vows in front of attorneys and court personnel instead of their family and friends. Video footage of the event captured this exceptional moment, highlighting the myriad human dramas unfolding daily in courtrooms and the occasional unusual requests judges handle. After the ceremony, Sells and Martin were returned to custody, abruptly ending their brief romantic interlude. The spontaneous wedding remains one of courtroom history's most unique and unexpected moments. On September 2, 2011 in Las Vegas, Rigetti committed a heinous act, taking the life of Alyssa Otremba. In court, every piece of evidence undergoes meticulous scrutiny to uncover the truth, showing that even the most elaborate lies cannot withstand examination.
This describes Alyssa's approach to life in general. She just was a cannonball in the water. There was nothing. She didn't put a toe in and kind of test the temperature. She just went all for it. I don't even think she could swim at that age, but you put some floaties on her and she just was ready to go. I mean, nothing stopped her.
And is that how you would characterize her in life?
Absolutely.
Tell us about that.
She just was all in. She wasn't scared of anything, and there were many times where she thought that she was older than she was, 5 going on 18 or whatever, but she was just such a joy.
State's Exhibit 187.
That precious little thing. I was told that a spanking spoon would be a good idea, and so I would often put it up on top of the piano, and she would climb up and she would get it, and Megan wasn't able to really defend herself at that age, and so she would just go over there and no to Megan, and it was just, she was just precious, but I mean, she was just, there she is climbing again. I mean, you couldn't stop this kid. You turn around and she's on top of the refrigerator and you don't even know how she got there, but she just, she was just so much fun.
Showing you State's Exhibit 188.
Oh, the poor cat. She loves that cat. That was my parents' cat, and she didn't get away fast enough that day, but she just was so sweet. She loved animals.
How old was Alyssa in this photo?
She was 5.
And what was she like as a little 5-year-old? What was her personality like?
She just made friends with everybody. She came home from kindergarten within the first week, and there was some new neighbors that had lived across the street, and one of the little boys was in her kindergarten class, and she just befriended him. I mean, she just was, waving, and she just wanted to be friends with everybody.
State's Exhibit 189.
And that was the first, I want to say that was the first day of kindergarten, and I made her stand there for a picture, and that just expresses her impatience for me sometimes.
Did this little sassy look kind of also encapsulate her throughout her life?
Oh, absolutely. I think I got that look on many occasions.
Tell us about this side of her.
She just, goodness, she was just so funny. I know she was little in this picture, but even, I guess she was 14. I took her to the library with me a lot. I was studying anatomy and physiology, and I would take her and let her do her schoolwork. And so many times people would think that we were sisters, and she just thought that was hilarious and so much fun until I would, tell her, nope, it's time to go do your work, because she just kind of wanted to eat that up. But sometimes she would laugh, sometimes I would get that look from her, and then she would, go and do what she needed to do.
Showing you State's Exhibit 191.
That was just, we had just moved back to the States from England, and we had our new little bundle of joy with us, and so I think that was our last family photo.
So how old is Alyssa in this photo?
She would have been 9.
And how old was Hayden?
She was about 2 or 3 months old.
And we see their dad Scott in this picture, is that right?
Yes.
Describe Alyssa and Scott's relationship.
Sometimes they were like siblings, but they liked to play a lot. They had Nerf guns. They'd run around and pelt each other. I mean, that took us to the emergency room on one occasion where she about took his finger off. But it was. This has been really hard for him.
Tell me how this has affected his life.
He had to go back to work. There wasn't time to fall apart, and so he had to go back to England. That's where he had lived at the time, and I was here for school, and so I think he tried to bury things as much as he could. Then I guess about 2 years had gone by, and he was deployed to the desert, and he had a breakdown and was hospitalized, and they sent him home. And on 2 separate occasions, they've he's put before a medical board to see about retiring him, because they're not sure if he can stay in the military with the conditions that our family has had to deal with.
Has this taken a toll on your relationship with your husband?
It's been very hard.
District Court, Clark County, Nevada. The State of Nevada Plaintiff versus Javier Rigetti, defendant. Case number C-11-276713-1, Department 12. Verdict. We, the jury in the above entitled case, having found the defendant, Javier Rigetti, guilty of count 1, murder of the first degree, and having found that the mitigating circumstances do not outweigh the aggravating circumstance or circumstances, impose a sentence of death. Dated at Las Vegas, Nevada, this 21st day of March, 2017, signed by juror number 2 foreperson. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, is this your verdict is read? So say you one, so say you all. As to defendant, Javier Rigetti.
Yes. Yes.
Does either side wish to have the jury panel polled? No. Okay. At this time, the clerk will record the verdict in the official record of the court. And at this time, ladies and gentlemen, we have come to the conclusion of the trial. So I am going to excuse you from your duty. Before I do, again, I want to extend my gratitude for your willingness to be here and participate in this case. And I know it was a long case, it was a difficult case, and I really do appreciate your willingness to be here. You are now going to be discharged. You can talk about the case, you can talk about it to your friends, your family, you can talk about it to anybody, but you are under no obligation to discuss it with anyone. I do allow the attorneys the opportunity to speak to the jury panel after I do excuse you, but again, it is up to you whether you want to speak to anybody. I just wanted to remind you that you are no longer under the admonition not to speak to anybody. So you're going to go with Ms. Rocha in the back. She's going to give you further instructions, and then you will be free to go. Again, thank you very much for your service to this court. The jury is discharged.
All rise for exiting jury, please. Jurors, please go to panel. Thank you, everyone. Please be seated.
Before you take your place outside the presence of the jury panel, the matter will now be referred to home probation and be set for sentencing.
May 9, 10:30.
Anything else outside the presence?
I filed the jury instructions. It was jury instruction number 11 was the one we had the issue with. We did some editing.
Okay.
That's what it's.
Yes.
So Judge, I think the state's objection, just to correct the record, and I apologize, what is marked as a defense proposed exhibit as paginated number 10 is the instruction that had mercy on line 9, and then the same pronunciation in essence of mercy alone is a valid reason for a juror to vote for something other than on lines 19 and 20. The state objected to it being there twice. I believe Your Honor's ruling was that you kept it in one instance without hope.
In 2015, in Kentucky, former commercial pilot and U.S. Army Major Christian Martin ended the lives of Edward Dansereau, Calvin Phillips, and Pamela Phillips. The prosecution detailed the sequence of events, revealing a significant twist in the entire episode.
Burglary, first degree, for the entering into the home of the Phillips, first for Calvin Phillips in the morning, and then again sometime in the immediate vicinity of 5:30 p.m. to murder Pamela Phillips and Ed Dansereau. Ed Dansereau, the person who you will hear really had no involvement in any of the background, any involvement of the defendant's motive that he had to kill Calvin Phillips. Ed Dansereau was simply a good person in the wrong place at the wrong time for the right reason, coming to help. But Christian Martin had motive, had the means, and the opportunity. Most importantly, the motive. So 3 murders, 2 burglaries, both on the same day. Arson in the burning, the incinerating of Pamela Phillips' car about 3.5 miles down the road. The burning of her car, which contained the bodies of Pam and Ed Dansereau, who had been shot in that 5:30 p.m. second entry into the Phillips home. And then bodies at some point later driven out to a location about 3.5 miles away called on Rosetown Road and incinerated in Pam Phillips' car. Arson for that. And then back in the morning when Calvin Phillips was murdered, attempted to burn Calvin Phillips' body, as you will hear. Clear evidence of t-shirt material, some paper towel material that had been set on fire next to Calvin Phillips' body, which had been thrown down into the cellar on the back porch. But when that cellar door, which is one of those at a very, very old house, one of those that you pull up a wooden cover over the cellar steps, when that cover was put back down, the fire went out. So Calvin Phillips' body did not burn, but there was evidence there of an attempt to burn. So thus the attempted arson. And then 3 separate charges for tampering with evidence, moving the bodies of all 3. So we begin with motive. Calvin Phillips was scheduled to be a key critical witness for Army prosecutors at Fort Campbell in the court-martial trial of the defendant, Christian Martin. The court-martial trial had been rescheduled a number of times In fact, it goes back, I believe, a couple of years, you'll hear, to the original bringing of the charges. Charges that actually came about in no small part because of Calvin Phillips. Christian Martin, back in 2012, 2011, was married to a woman named Joan Harmon. And she resided with him at this house on South Main in Pembroke, along with her 3 children. Subsequent to moving in there, the marriage fell apart. Joan Harmon moved out of the house with her 3 children. It was not a friendly breakup. Calvin and Pamela Phillips befriended Joan Harmon. This helped her move out, helped her move her things out of Martin's house across the street. Actually babysat for her young daughters on occasion.
My mom was incredibly kind. She had a warmth about her that I think, biased as I may be, was very rare. And anyone that knew her just knew her as one of the sweetest people they'd ever known. And so I grew up in an environment where I knew I was loved, and that I knew that she wanted the best for me my entire life, and that she would do whatever she could as a mom to guide and just know that there was a foundation there. And I think that has been important throughout my entire life, because she stopped working and she stopped focusing on herself to give, and frankly, give energy and effort to me. And I think that really summarizes my mom. It did from whenever I was a child. And she carried that same energy and work ethic into her work at the bank. Whenever I graduated high school and went to college and was in my life, she pushed herself all the way into work. She was early to go and late to leave. She was dedicated. And I think that dedication is really how she spent her life. So whether it was on me or work or anything that she spent energy on, that's how she approached it. And I think that warmth with that dedication is a pretty special person. You heard some people in Casey speak about her, and that radiant warmth, I think really that captures her essence to me.
You mentioned it already, but you said she went back to work and focused on work for a while. Tell me a little bit about her work at the bank.
So her focus was on keeping the bank safe. She was in compliance, and so there are banking regulations and rules and all the things that banks need to do to, not become into audit or have poor policies or what have you. Banking regulations change yearly, monthly, I don't often. And so my mother was a consummate student. She liked to learn. She could sit and just read and just absorb new information or find a new interesting, mundane as it may be to me for banking regulations. She was interested in making sure that organization was safe. And I think that was a perfect job for her.
And the things that she did at the bank, did she then in turn give back to the community?
She did. She was very, she grew up in a single mother environment. So she was very focused on financial literacy specifically for women. There is an addiction center for specifically young women in Hopkinsville. And so she spent time really focusing on financial literacy. And her idea, the concept and energy was spent that if people could make better choices, they could change their maybe next phase. She spent a lot of time thinking about that and spending energy in that. She also was a part of Leadership Hopkinsville, which I think is interesting because keep in mind, I knew my mom when I was small, and in high school, and on. So she moved, in my eyes, from a stay-at-home mom to a vice president at a bank, and then a community leader, right? So I was seeing her come into her own, right? And so she was active with Leadership Hopkinsville in financial literacy, and when she wasn't at the bank, she was giving.
We touched on it a little bit, but how long were your parents married?
They married in 1981, so it would have been 34 years. They would be coming on 40 years as of now, together.
And when was her birthday?
Her birthday was November 20th, 1957.
November what?
November 20, 1957.
November 20. And when was your parents' anniversary?
It was around the same time. I'm sorry.
The jury presented their perspective, and the judge also shared thoughts based on their statement.
All right, as to instruction number 3, aggravating circumstances, you have circled either yes or no for each aggravator. As to the first potential aggravator, that the offense of murder was committed while the defendant was engaged in the commission of burglary in the first degree, you have circled yes. And as to the aggravator that the offense of murder was committed and the defendant's act or acts of killing were intentional and resulted in multiple deaths, you have circled yes and signed instruction number 3. Is that correct? Yes. As to verdict form A, count 1, murder. We, the jury, fix the defendant's punishment under count 1 for the offense of murder at life without benefit of probation or parole, and you've signed that, correct?
Yes, sir.
Count 2, murder. We, the jury, fix the defendant's punishment under count 2 for the offense of murder at life without benefit of probation or parole, and you signed that one.
Yes, sir.
Count 3, murder. We, the jury, fix the defendant's punishment under count 3 for the offense of murder at life without the benefit of probation or parole, and signed that verdict form, correct?
Yes, sir.
All right. And count 4, burglary first degree. We, the jury, fix the defendant's punishment under count 4 for the offense of burglary first degree at 20 years. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Count 5, burglary first degree. We, the jury, fix the defendant's punishment under count 5 for the offense of burglary first degree at 20 years. And you've signed that one. Then, count 6, first degree arson. We, the jury, fix the defendant's punishment under count 6 for the offense of first degree arson at life. And you've signed that one.
Yes, sir.
Count 7, criminal attempt to commit first degree arson. We, the jury, fix the defendant's punishment under count 7 for the offense of criminal attempt to commit first degree arson at 20 years. And it bears your signature, correct? Tampering with physical evidence, count 8. We, the jury, fix the defendant's punishment under count 8 for the offense of tampering with physical evidence at 5 years, and you signed that one.
Yes.
Count 9, same charge. We, the jury, fix the defendant's punishment under count 9 for the offense of tampering with physical evidence at 5 years, and you signed that one.
Yes.
Count 10, tampering with physical evidence. We, the jury, fix the defendant's punishment under count 10 for the offense of tampering with physical evidence at 5 years, and you signed that verdict form. Then, verdict K, concurrent consecutive sentences. We recommend that the punishments fixed for the defendant under counts 1 through 10 be served concurrently at the same time. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Were your decisions about the sentences unanimous?
Yes, sir.
All right. Does the Commonwealth wish to poll the jury? Does the defense wish to poll the jury?
No, Your Honor.
Very well.
At the conclusion, the judge delivered the sentence.
Mr. Martin, as you know, this matter was brought on for trial by jury beginning the 2nd day of June 2021 through the 17th day of June 2021 on a change of venue in the Hardin Circuit Court. And you were present throughout those proceedings with your attorneys. And the matter was presented to a jury which returned verdicts of guilty on 3 counts of murder, 2 counts of burglary in the first degree, 1 count of arson in the first degree, 1 count of criminal attempt to commit arson in the first degree, 3 counts of tampering with physical evidence. The jury imposed sentences of life in prison without the possibility of parole on each of the murder charges, 20 years on each of the burglary first-degree charges, life in prison on the arson first-degree charge, 20 years on criminal attempt to arson first degree, and 5 years on tampering with physical evidence in all 3 of those counts. Under Kentucky law, the fact that your offenses involved the use of a firearm makes the sentences violent offenses, the murders at least violent offenses, and you are not eligible for probation. Therefore, it is the judgment of this court that you be sentenced accordingly as I have described the jury verdicts. And those sentences will run concurrently for a total sentence of life in prison without the possibility of parole. You are continued in the custody of the jailer of Christian County until such time as the Kentucky Department of Corrections determines where you will be incarcerated. All right, thank you.
Judge, may I ask, will this order be entered today?
Yes.
In that case, Judge, I have some appellate documents I would like to file.
Very well. You are entitled to appeal the court's judgment, and you have 30 days to do so. Apparently, your attorneys have already seen to the importance of that and filing the paperwork now. Will you all be continuing to represent him?
We're asking the DPA be appointed.
All right. Do you have an order to that effect?
Yes, sir. I've got a motion. Here's the notice of appeal. I have a motion and order granting informa pauperis status.
Okay.
And then I have the designation of record, which includes today's proceedings.
Very well. So ordered.
The IFP order, in fact, appoints DPA.
Yes.
Okay.
Judge, there was one other matter I wanted to to raise, and I'm not sure procedurally how Your Honor usually does it, but we are asking that the evidence in the case be preserved, given the possibility of post-conviction relief.
All right, well, if you want to tender an order to that effect, I'm confident the evidence will be preserved as it typically is and always has been, but just out of an abundance of caution, if you want to preserve that issue by tendering an order.
Your Honor, Commonwealth without objection.
Yes, ma'am.
And Your Honor, the Commonwealth requests that two family members be permitted to speak.
No, ma'am, I don't believe that's necessary. The court was well informed about the family's position when they testified at the before the jury deliberated on sentence. And plus, I will say for the record, the PSI report in this case is the most comprehensive one I believe I've ever seen. And I have read each and every letter that was submitted by a family member. So I'm pretty well versed on how they feel. And I think I'm well advised to deny the request that they address the court at this time under the circumstances. But let me reassure them that their letters have been carefully considered.
Thank you, Your Honor.
All right, thank you. All right. I think that takes care of business, gentlemen. Mr. Martin, you're remanded. Thank you.
Big thanks to our viewers for joining the courtroom journey with us. Your interest in the stories of justice is what keeps our channel alive.